Hello, Ray.
Hi, I'm
Does
so
it
excited.
does it feel like the old days?
It does, and it's like, I wish I could just sit and, like, hug you, but
I know,
obviously
I know, I know. We had planned this. I'm a little bit bummed because I was planning on most of the sessions that we're doing today have been virtual, but I wanted a live element. And so Ray and I had this plan in person, but with everything going on in the world, I we had to switch it to virtual. And I do regret that because I wanted to squeeze you, but I will hug you from afar.
Yes,
For
yes.
those of you who don't know, Sondra Ray is one of my lovely, lovely friends, and one of the best things to come out of my journey in radio. So she is the co-host on Johnny's House on XL1067 in Orlando. And yeah, how are you doing?
I'm good. I mean, it's been crazy, obviously, for everybody in the last almost 2 years now. It's been wild, but a lot of the things that, like, going into work didn't change for me, so
Yeah,
that's been good to, like, not be locked down in my house, besides when I did have COVID and I had to stay in my house,
yeah.
but I've been going to work, which is nice, and so I
Favorite
got
level
that.
of normalcy.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which is great. I've been following you guys and sort of like what how you guys have handled this. And all I kept thinking is like, when I was working there, so we worked together for 5, 6 years, for it's been
Yes.
a while now. And we went through a lot together in the sense that like of, personal things, of work things, of Pulse and like all these major events that happened, while we were in radio. But a pandemic is something that I never envisioned you guys ever having to deal with.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, you know how it is in radio, like, everybody we're like brothers and sisters, and we can bicker and all that stuff, but the surprising thing is that, like, with the pandemic, this is, like, brought us closer, and I feel like it made people not as serious
Yeah.
and not as, like, stern and take life as, like, so seriously as they did before, so I feel like that's been good.
Well, and I feel like, they always said, I've talked to a couple of friends, who are close to me and kind of knew me from my radio days. And the one thing that I would tell them is like in radio, our objection or our objective, no matter what was going on in the world, was always to try to be a place that was lighthearted and a distraction
Yeah.
from what's going on in the world. But that's hard when literally like everything is, falling to hell.
Yes, and there's been, like, I lost my grandpa, I lost my dog, I lost like, the night that my grandpa passed away, I was with him, like, leading up into that, and that night he passed away, I went to work the next day, and so I was like, you like you said, you're trying to be, like, lighthearted and everything, but I feel like the way that radio is, like, now, obviously, it's like therapy for us to, like, talk about
Yeah.
our lives because it makes other people feel like they're not alone, which is
Totally.
nice. And
Totally,
so, like,
and that's one of the things, and that's kind of why how this I was just talking to Ray, like, off camera, off screen, just kind of giving her, like, a little bit of an update on how this all came to be, and it was truly, like I think it was in a selfish way, it was that's what I missed. I miss it. There's a lot of things I don't miss about radio. 3 a.m. alarms is one of them. Um, but one of the things that I do miss is like when shit does hit the fan, radio was always a place where I could go and vent, and then people would echo back to me, "Oh yeah, I've been through this thing. I've been
Mhm.
through that too. Don't worry, you're not alone." Or here's
Yeah.
tips. And so it was sort of like, okay, well, I miss having that community aspect, and that's sort of where I wanted to
Mhm.
have conversations like this so that people know that they're not alone in whatever they're
Yeah.
going through.
And then there's, like, the opposite side of that where it's like, if you're going through shit, you're like, "Yes, I have to be on because that's, like, my job. I have to be on all the time." But, like, I'm at a point now where I'll take mental health days. "Sorry, I can't come in today because I am listening to myself or else I'm gonna lose it on you guys or lose it on the air, and I don't want that."
That's
So
huge for you because I've known you like since we were like young 20s. And so one of the reasons that I immediately when I planned the summit, I was like one of the people that I wanted to talk to was you, because you have this platform on radio, you have a following on social media at Sondra Ray if you don't already follow her. But you posted a really interesting blog recently, and it was talking a lot about your mental health. And so when you and I worked together, I knew that you struggle with anxiety. I knew that that was something that, that you had going on, but like Laura and I had the depression aspect as
Mhm.
well. And I didn't feel like you could relate to that as much because I'm not sure that you had ever gone through like a deep
Yeah.
to your core depression. And so, it was one of those things where like we could relate to each other about anxiety. But when I saw you post about, not to say that I'm like thrilled you went through that because obviously I'm not, but it sounds like you've learned a lot about mental health recently. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, I have always had anxiety. Like I have, I'm always like fidgeting my hands and I'm always like anxious about every little thing. And I was never one to like go and talk to somebody or like learn about medication or anything like that. So finally I got to a point where I was like, okay, this anxiety is literally taking over my life and I can't handle it anymore. And it also got to a point where I was like, I didn't want to get out of bed or I didn't want to do anything. I had no motivation and I have toddlers. I have twin toddlers at home. So I'm like, this is not okay. Like, I can't be living this way. And so I started talking to a therapist and she was like, to be honest, like your anxiety is sounding like depression and the way that I was explaining it. And she was like, this might be like the first time you've heard this or a wake up call, but this is like depression.
Yeah.
And so hearing that, I'm like, okay, like I kind of figured that this is where I was at. But I mean, I don't know. It was just like a rude awakening. And now that I like know what my triggers are or know when I need to like step back and be like, okay, I need to step away from my children right now before I scream or get vocal and I don't want to do that. Or like my wife, I've been teaching her like millions of different things about mental health because she is law enforcement and so she does deal with people every single day, but it's like when she comes home I need her to understand that like I need like you need to sit and breathe with me. You need to sit and like realize that I need to step aside and that I need help. And so it's been like a learning process for everybody, to be honest. And
Yeah,
just
so you wrote some of the like I guess the things that you had commented in your post, you
Mhm,
said that you didn't like who you were, that you felt useless, you felt paranoid.
mhm.
Was there like was there an instance that triggered all of this, or had it been just building up over time, adding a pandemic, adding toddlers, like all of the things accumulated? Is that what it was?
So right now I'm going through EMDR and from what I'm learning is that it's something that has started from a very young age. This is something that I struggled with from what I realize now was starting at like 6, 7 years old. And so it's something that's kind of like built up over the years. And so finally, I think that like what triggered me to just automatically spiral out of control was just so much stress on top of like the pandemic and work and toddlers. I think I just got to a point where I was so overwhelmed where I'm like, I would look in the mirror and I would be like disgusted. I'm like, I don't understand what's wrong with me. I have a perfect life. It seems like a healthy, children, a wife that loves me, and I still yet feel like I don't deserve any of this. And I don't. It's like a hard thing to explain because it's like why do I feel this way? But it's
Mhm.
something that started out from when I was younger, and just being embarrassed from when I was a child and like my family going through some things that kind of just stockpiled on top of one another and me just feeling like I don't deserve anything. And
Well,
so
and that's interesting because one thing that I know about you, knowing you as a friend, like personally, is that your childhood, your parents struggled. You had parents who loved you, but financially and like situationally, there were things that I know that you struggled with in childhood. So having like the ability now to have an amazing career and to have an amazing house and like a family that is like, so I would say stable and supportive, probably does feel a little bit like, whoa, this is like, what did I do to deserve this? Which is hard because
yeah.
you feel like people look at you and you're like, oh my God, Ray, like everything's perfect. Why are you like,
Yeah, and I
you
think
know?
that was also, like, the other side of me beating myself up because everybody always says, "Oh, people always have it worse." People and I would always think to myself, like, "I'm feeling guilty," and now I even feel, like, way more guilty because
Yeah.
I know people have it way worse. But what I realized with, like, my therapist and stuff is that I have, like, I think everything is gonna end in a catastrophic way. So, no matter if I have a healthy marriage, to me, like, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
I saw my family like have everything in life and then have it taken away. So like for me, I'm like, okay, so when am I going to lose my job? When am I not going to be able to pay my bills? Like, cause that's what I'm used to.
Yeah.
And so it would have a catastrophic scenario every time a situation would pop up. It would end in the worst way. And so I didn't want to be that way. And so I'm like, if I know that I'm doing this and I've seen my mom do this the whole time I was growing up, I'm like, the last thing I want are for my children to have this anxiety. So I was like, I need to change.
Yeah. Which is great. I mean, so, okay, wait, circle back to the EMDR because I got very excited whenever I heard you were doing this because, okay, so backstory, towards like the end of when I was working with Ray and working in radio, there was an instance where my dad and my family, we were on a plane and he passed out, almost died. It was horribly traumatic. And it started invoking like PTSD symptoms in me. And so actually Laura was the one who found a therapist that specialized in EMDR, and she booked it. It's Laura's, if Laura's ever watching this, she's going to be like, bleh. But it's the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me, which is find a therapist. Cause you know, when you're going through it, it is a struggle to even pick up the phone and find a therapist. Like it's overwhelming. And so she found the therapist, booked the appointment, and paid for the first 3 sessions. And it's the nicest thing anyone has done for me. And I'll get choked up thinking about it. But that therapist specialized in EMDR, which I remember after, how would you describe EMDR?
So EMDR is something where it's like, it doesn't have to just be like PTSD. It could just be like some sort of, it's so
like
hard.
It's like a subconscious thing. And so
it's like how people file like post-traumatic stuff. If people file like traumatized situations in their head, normal people can like move it over to the other side of the brain and realize, okay, I survived, I can move on and I can remember those things, but I can move on from it. Other people like have that trauma in their head that they just kind of, it's there and it's always
stored.
there. Yes, exactly.
And what's weird to me is that when I had gone to therapy in the past, I thought that you would sit down and it was talk therapy. I thought that was the only kind of therapy that was out there. You sit there and you talk through all of the instances, and I was fully prepared to have to do that. And instead, this woman handed me these 2 like buzzers in my hand, and she had me sit on the couch and close my eyes. We didn't talk at all, and it would just buzz like left, right, left, right, left, right. And then she would ask me certain questions. And I remember after the first session messaging my friend Amber, who's also speaking at the summit, but she's a licensed mental health counselor. And I remember messaging her going, I think this is a fraud. I think this lady is a quack. I think that it felt very Scientology-like, where it was just like, it was, I don't know. I was like, this can't possibly be real. We didn't talk about the instance at all. So tell me what you thought when you first, like when they first brought it up to you.
Okay. So first of all, I've been doing like talk therapy for over a year now. Like couple times a month. And so it got to a point where like, I also talked to my friend who is in mental health, and she was like, listen, what you do for a living is talk. You talk about your problems, you talk about your situation. So talk therapy is probably not the best for you. So she showed me EMDR. And when I showed up there, and I was kind of very like skeptical about it too. Cause I'm like, this is weird. I feel like it's like, you're going to hypnotize me and things are going to like disappear. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, so what games are we playing today?
Yeah.
But she, like the way that my therapist put it, she was like, listen, she kept telling me all the time, she's like, this is going to seem weird. You're going to think that I'm crazy. But she was like, I swear to you that the stats show that this will be beneficial to most people.
Yeah.
And so she did the lights and the triggers for me too. But that was more of a distraction for me. So there's other things where you could do like the butterfly hug and the taps, or you could do like the normal finger. But at first, the same thing. I'm like, I would close my eyes and do it. And she'd be like, okay, so how are you feeling? And I'd be like, to be honest, this is weird.
Yeah.
And she just had to like keep reminding me, this is going to seem crazy. Just go with it. Just go with it. And she would pull out like these emotion, like flashcards that like children would use.
Yeah.
And be like, tell me what emotions you're feeling today. And she'd be like, again, you probably feel like a child and that this is a scam, but it's not. Because it's like, you know, for me, the reason why a lot of people do EMDR is you have to go back to the root of the problem and live through that experience again and like talk to yourself at that stage and like get through it and try to get through it. But like for me, my childhood, I don't want to say was robbed from me, but like I knew way too much at a young age.
Yeah.
I knew way too much at a young
You
age.
grew up really fast.
Yeah, and so those emotional cards and those childish things where we like throw a ball back and forth to each other because I need to recenter back to where I am. It's childish, but it's what you need. You need to bring that inner child out and heal that person because that's what the core of the problem is.
Totally. And like so in a nutshell, EMDR is eye movement rapid desensitization.
Yes.
Desensitize, right? So basically what it is in the least scientific way possible is somehow you have to move your eyes back and forth. And what it does in while you're thinking of certain things, somebody who's I didn't realize, because to me, when I'm sitting there on the couch and this lady's not even talking to me and I'm thinking, why would I pay this woman money? Like she's not doing anything. I'm sitting here doing all the work myself. It actually takes a lot of training and a lot of years for people who are trained in that field to be able to do it. But basically, like Ray said, there's other ways of mimicking the movement back and forth, but it helps you go back to the root of the problem, and it helps you reprocess that trauma without having to talk through it. And so I did that form of therapy. My dad, last year during COVID, was going through a really, 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 really horrible time. And a lot of it was pandemic induced. There were some other things going on. He was worried about the businesses closing and all this stuff. And so he ended up, and I had been asking him for a long time, like, Dad, like you really should consider, because he had a horrible childhood. And so I thought, there's got to be a way that he could go to therapy without having to relive all of the horrible things that have happened to him, like talking through it. So his therapist they actually did it virtually, and I didn't realize you could do EMDR virtually, but sure enough, she had him do the butterfly hug, like the tapping. And he is a new person. He has said, like, I wish that I had done that sooner. He's like, it's the best thing I ever did for myself is do therapy.
Yeah. So I've only done a couple of sessions, and that makes me like so happy to hear that. And I didn't even realize that that's what you did after that happened with your dad. Like, I had no idea. Cause like when you hear therapy, you just think, okay, you're going to sit on a couch and talk about your problems and then you're going to go about your day. But like it's totally different. And it's something that I wish I started sooner, because I've only done 2 sessions, but I feel like I'm already learning about why I am the way I am. And that's going to help me not only be like a better mother, but a better wife, and just be better like by myself. Cause that's the thing. Like I was so scared to be by myself.
Yeah, you've always wanted to
meet people.
Yeah, you've always wanted to be around people. You've always been very social. So what has it taught you about yourself? So how do you feel like you get to that place of being comfortable? Because you've been in a very long-term relationship. You've been at the same job for a long time. Your kids are now growing up, but like, what's something that it taught you that you didn't realize about yourself?
That I beat myself up. I beat myself up so bad that like whenever I start to say the things that I say in my head, if I sit and I say it out loud, like it's disturbing. And I got to a point where I would never say this to another human being. Like I would never say the stuff that I say to myself to somebody else. And so like, why am I saying it to myself? You know, it's just because we always are our hardest like critics, but it got nasty inside of my head. And I learned that, you know, that's not okay. And journaling has helped me tremendously to figure out like, write down your problems, write down how you're feeling, and go back in a couple of days and go back and read it. Like if I'm going through a spiral out of control in my head, I'll go and write something down and be like, I am a terrible mother. My kids want the other mom and not me. Like they don't want me whatsoever. And I'll go back and I'll read it and I'll be like, why was I so crazy that day? You know? And I'm like, why did I say these things to myself? So it's making me stop and realize like, be nice to myself. I need to.
Well, because it's so true, right? Like you wouldn't, and I guess that was going to be my follow-up question is like, you wouldn't say those things. Or if Missy came to you and was saying like, these are the things that I'm thinking to myself, you would be like, what? Like, why? You know, that's so not true. Like, or if your daughter came to you and like had those things. So how has that affected your relationships, both with Missy and then with your kids in terms of therapy?
So I feel like with Missy, she was kind of like, wow, I didn't know that you were that like caught up in your head and that I was saying all these things. And I think that like with me, and another reason why EMDR has worked with me is that I am very terrible at putting my emotions into words. Like whenever I am flustered or stressed out or angry, I cannot put my feelings into words. So like sitting there and like doing the taps and all that stuff does help me tremendously, but also it's taught me that I need to vocalize what's wrong with me. Like I cannot just be sitting there in my head. Same thing with my daughter. And like one day I picked up my kids from school and like I just remember this is when I was like, okay, I need to go get help. One day I picked up my kids from school and my daughter looked at me and she's like, Mommy, are you happy? And I'm like, you're 2 years old. Why the hell are you asking me if I'm happy?
Yeah.
You know? And I'm like, I just picked you from school. I haven't even spent the day with you. And you just asked me if I was happy.
You're like, well, little do you know, honey.
Yeah.
All of the things in mommy's head is like, it's a lot, girl. So, and I guess like in a, just like for my own curiosity, has this affected work or the way that you approach situations at work? Like, how's that manifested?
So I used to be one to like harp on everything. I would be, wow,
Okay.
very unprofessional. I thought I
It's okay.
But I used to be one that like literally over like the slightest thing, I would just like think about it all day long. I would harp on it. I would like, you know, get so emotional over the smallest thing. And so now I'm like, whatever. I'm going to survive. Everybody else is going to survive. If people don't care that much, why do I care that much?
Yeah.
And I don't want to say it's made me like not care as much, but it's made me prioritize.
Like roll off your back, like just sort of not like muster over things.
And it goes back to like the whole, like, I was so rough and hard on myself mentally that I'm like, they're not thinking that. So why am I thinking that?
Well, and it's, I mean, I guess particularly in like show business, in the entertainment industry, in like what radio and broadcasting is, like when you have a light shown on you and a microscope shown on you by hundreds of thousands of people at all times, like that in and of itself is a lot of pressure. And I don't think that it's something that, as much as I know that like we enjoy it, and it's not really, I don't know how you feel, but for me, it wasn't necessarily an intimidating thing, but it's sort of like, I know that everything that I'm doing or posting or saying is being like analyzed.
Oh yeah, 100%. And the thing is that like I started out so strong on like my YouTube when I had my YouTube when I first started out, and I like, you know, was vlogging about my pregnancy and all that stuff. But then it got to a point where I started vlogging about my kids, and I was so excited, which I'm still going to do because I want them to go back and look at these videos. But like I got to a point where I was reading every single message, and where it was like, you know, I hope your children die because you're in a gay marriage. Then it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
you know? And like, you think that you're just going to like rub it off and shake it off and move on. But like those things will sit stored in your head.
All it takes is one comment. Like I was talking to someone about this the other day when I was getting, I got a DM that kind of, it was sort of like, wow, it like almost ruined my entire day. And I could get in a normal given day, I could get 100 of those. And I would be like, like they're anonymous. Like it's a troll. It's no big deal. But there's always that one like you're having a bad day, and there's the one comment and you're like, this is what I'm going to focus on, and nothing else anyone says to me that's good or positive is going to outweigh that.
And even if you're having like the best day and you read that, that's where it's going to like sit and be stored until like when you are having a negative day and you start, or me, when I start spiraling out of control, I think about those messages and I'm like, damn it, that person was right.
But it's interesting that you talk about in EMDR where it's going back to things that are filed and stored away. It's almost like those negative comments, you push them to the back of your mind, but they're still there unless you process them and you realize like, okay, I'm going to file them away somewhere else.
Mhm.
It is still stored there. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's kind of interesting.
One thing that I really learned with EMDR too that I feel like was like kind of eye-opening is that whenever she would be like, "So what are you feeling? What are you hearing? Like what are you seeing?" It's like it's all about like going back and living that. And I would be like, "Well, I feel, alone." And she would be like, "Okay, so why are you feeling alone? And is it you saying that or is it somebody else's voice?" And so like also when it's like, "Oh, I don't deserve this," or "I'm going to lose my job," or "I don't deserve nice things." It's like, "Okay, is it you saying that in your head? Do you hear your own voice saying that or do you recall somebody in your life telling you that?" Like why are you so bent up or like, why are you harping on this one conversation that you might have had with somebody that didn't even like you in the first place? And like, why are you constantly thinking about that? So for me, I'm like, okay, I don't deserve nice things. I don't deserve this job. But is it me saying that or did I hear that from somebody?
Right,
And
right.
when you figure that
Is it
out,
somebody exactly, is it somebody else's voice that's saying that? That's so interesting.
yeah, because
I,
it back in the day, like I remember like kids would make fun of us for, living in a hotel when I was in high school. And
yeah.
it's like that's where some of my embarrassment came from. But it's like at that time I kind of just like, whatever, this is my life, like forget about it. But now I'm like, if somebody I meet, if I feel like they don't like me, I go back to that little girl or that girl in high school where I'm like embarrassed and I shut down.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so interesting. So what how do you think that this will because okay, so you're how
1.
32, 31.
Mhm.
Um at 31, how and seeking like this type of therapy for the first time, how do you think that's going to affect your parenting? Like what are you guys doing as parents to talk about, because I look at my dad who's like 65 going to therapy for the first time and I'm like, if everyone went to therapy early on, like the world would be a better place.
Yeah.
Like, but like, you know what? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how
Yeah.
does that affect your parenting? Because I think about like, if I'm a parent one day, like, what do I need to do to break that cycle?
Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to break that
Yeah.
cycle because it started from when my mom was a child, and it started from when my dad was a child. So I never knew what mental health was until I got older. And then like some people are like, "Oh, mental health, it's like that's the thing to talk about nowadays." Like that's what everybody's doing. But the thing is that everybody's got their issues. And if you're going to go and talk to somebody to work out your issues, then freaking do it. So I think that when it comes to like my parenting, it's definitely going to change me because I'm going to know. I'm going to know. I feel like if I see my children and they're not like okay emotionally, it's going to make me want to sit and talk to them. Or if they want their space, then they can have their space. But I'm going to be able to like be there and be aware of their struggles, like mentally, if that makes sense. Cause it's like, my parents kind of just ignored it. Move on. Like brush it off. We'll figure it out later on. We'll be fine. Tomorrow's a new day, but it's like, okay, but I'm going to think about yesterday and the day before and the day before, even if it was a new day.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm going to be able to sit and talk to them and like, know, hey, if this is how you're feeling, it's okay to feel that way.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. And if
Yeah.
anything, we can talk to somebody about it as well.
It's true. And like even I noticed like even with it's interesting, even with my dad, like to just be able to like sit like ask him like, "Oh, so how was your therapy session?" Like that is massive. Like, and for him to be able to reply like that is just, it's really cool. It's actually a running joke in our house now where like, so our dog Chip is like a total asshole.
I love him so
No,
much.
he's awful. He's awful. But my dad was like using like one of those laser pointers and like Chip like freaked out over it. And like hours later, he was still very worked up, like,
Yeah.
and he was like hyperventilating. And my dad like sat there in front of him and he's like, Chip. And so we do we do the butterfly hug for everything. Like if anyone is like worked up, it's like kind of our like symbol, like, okay, look, like it's going to be okay. You have to do the butterfly hug.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think you're right. Like talking to your kids, being in tune with your kids, like letting them know that it's okay to not be okay is like a
Yeah.
big thing.
Yeah, and I just feel like I want them to know that their feelings are valid no matter what. No
Yeah.
matter if they feel stupid, if they feel, like, embarrassed, like, that's how you're feeling, and your feelings are your feeling, like, I can't get mad at you for that,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that's also, like, while we were growing up and even when our parents were growing up, it was kinda like, "Don't feel that way," like, you know I
Yeah,
don't know if it
man
was how,
up,
like,
suck
we
up.
were.
Like
Yeah,
that
exactly.
was the thing. That was the literal like phrase, you know?
Mhm.
And what people don't realize is that yeah, you can not address it now and
Mhm.
it's going to show up later in some form or another. Like
Yeah.
and that could be in the form of an addiction, it could be in the form of depression, anxiety. Like it's going to show up again. Like just
Yeah.
cuz you don't address it now.
Yeah, and also, like, that's why I feel like that's why a lot of people are, like, bullies. Like, the last
Yeah.
thing I want are for my children to be bullies, and that's because they have this, like, emotion that's, like, caught up inside of them that they don't know how to express, and
Yeah.
so they're gonna be mean to other people.
Yeah, totally. No, you're totally right. So if there's somebody watching this and they're like, okay, okay, I've addressed the fact that like I'm not alone in this and I know that I have something that is bothering me that I could work on. What is your advice to someone who's seeking out like therapy for the first time?
Well, one thing that I did learn is that sometimes, which is very unfortunate in our country, it's very hard to get therapy. It's very hard to get help. And that is the worst thing that I've learned about this whole journey because before me, it was, my sister, my friend. It was other people that needed help. And it was like the hardest thing without being like, hey, I might need to get Baker active because I'm at a point now where I'm like, shutting down. Like
Yeah.
I need to talk to somebody. But I feel like with one thing that did come out of the pandemic is virtual therapy. You can literally schedule an appointment with a therapist that is available the next day. If you go through a network, no matter what, you
Yeah.
can, if you want to reach out to other people, there's like Facebook societies that I found out about. There's podcasts you can sit and listen to. There's, if you like to read, there's like self-help books that you can read. But I wouldn't be ashamed. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be embarrassed about how you feel. And there's so many outlets. So I feel like if one outlet you feel defeated, don't give up on it.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you is like it sounds like you got kind of lucky with your with this therapist that you're seeing
Yeah.
because it sounds like you guys connected pretty
Yeah.
quickly. Is that true?
Yeah, it's so true. And I've talked to so many people where they're like, "Oh, well, this guy was a joke. Like this guy didn't, feel like he was into what I was listening or what I was saying." And so that's what I'm saying. Like, if one outlet you feel defeated and you don't feel comfortable, there's another person that will sit and listen to you, or there's like another source, like the lights and the vibration for EMDR. That didn't work for me. It
Yeah.
like made me even anxious and crazier. And so I was like, this isn't working for me. I straight
Yeah.
up told her. And so she made me do this. And that
Yeah.
makes me feel like I'm hugging myself, and that worked.
Yeah.
So I feel like don't give up and just keep asking people for help or what you can do.
Yeah, I love that. No, that's great advice because it's really true. And it is really defeating. Like I said, the nicest thing like anyone has ever done was to make the appointment for me and pay for it and all of that because it's really stressful. And when you're going through it, like the last thing you want to do. And actually, I remember I was experiencing some like social anxiety. And that's what I wanted to talk to my therapist about. But to make an appointment, I had to get on the phone. And it was like, well, I don't
Yeah.
want to talk to anybody on the phone right now. That's
Yeah.
part of the anxiety.
Yeah.
Like, and I would just put it off.
Yeah.
And so, but you don't have to do that nowadays. Like there are platforms out there where you can do, like you said, virtual. You don't actually have to pick
Yeah.
up the phone and call.
Well, like I have a co-payment sometimes when I do my therapy appointments, and it's like whenever I see them calling, it makes me anxious, and I don't answer it because I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my god, this reminds me I have my appointment. I know I have my appointment, but I can always pay when I get there. It's like I'm the same way. There's
Yeah.
like little things where I'm like, oh my god, this is triggering me, but
I know. Well, fortunately, they've come a long way
yeah.
in your options, which I'm very thankful for. And
Mhm.
I'm very thankful that you are doing better and that I'm really thankful to talk to you now in the stage of your process where you've sort of like identified the problem and you're starting to get help. You're not quite like at the
No,
finish
god,
line yet.
I'm not
But I
healed.
think that's really encouraging. Neither am I, like I think it's really encouraging for people you know, to see the process and
Yeah.
how it unfolds.
But I'll tell you, like, I was journaling yesterday. Like,
Yeah.
you get caught up in the world and your brain with social media. It's just there's a lot.
I
You
know.
got to listen to yourself.
I know. All right, girl. Well, I love you. Best of luck. Send hugs to the family. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
I will. I love you.
Love
Mwah.
you.
Good
Mwah.
luck.
Bye.